Diabetes Connections is brought to you by DEXCOM. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with DEXCOM. And by Club 1921, where diabetes connections are made.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, the US FDA approves Insulet's Omnipod 5 Automated Insulin Delivery System. This was submitted more than a year ago, but has been delayed due to COVID-19. Let's hope this approval signals at least the beginning of the end of that logjam at the FDA. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. I am your host, Stacey Sims, and we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. If you are new to the show, my son was diagnosed with type 1 right before he turned 2 back in 2006. He is now 17. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I do not have any kind of diabetes. I have background in broadcasting, and that is how you get the podcast. And for this episode, I am so excited to speak to Dr. Trang Ly, Senior Vice President and Medical Director at Insulet Corporation. Insulet, of course, makers of the Omnipod. I asked for questions within our Facebook group. That's Diabetes Connections, the group. And boy, did you come through. But because Dr. Ly is part of the medical side of Insulet, I'm sure you understand there are some questions she just can't answer. It's not her realm of expertise. But I promise we will follow up in the weeks and months to come. And I will do a deep dive into what is such a huge story for our community. I am always so excited to see more choice for people with diabetes, and automated insulin delivery is a game changer. Let's go through the basics because while many of you just want to get to when can I get this in my hand, and I've used this product for years in its basic forms, I just want to get the loop. Let me just take a quick second and set the table because there are a lot of people new to pumping, to pods, and I just want to be absolutely clear. And this is going to be very simplistic. Dr. Ly will get into many more details, but the pod is what sits on the body. That's what holds the insulin, and it infuses the insulin into the body. There are no buttons. There's no display. There is a separate handheld controller. This could be a phone. We will talk about that. And that is how you control the pod when it comes to giving insulin for meals. You still must give insulin for meals with this system. With Omnipod 5, you also have the DEXCOM G6, that is the continuous glucose monitor. The pod and the CGM work together. It very simplistically gives you more or less insulin to try to keep you in range. There are similar systems on the market already. The Medtronic 670 was the first like this in the United States. Now they have their 770G system. Tandem has the Control IQ system. For the record, that is what my son has used since January of 2020. And Omnipod's system is a little different. These systems all have differences from one another. But as you'll hear, the Omnipod system is the first in the US that will actually learn from you. And we'll talk about what that means. Omnipod 5 is going to launch through the pharmacy channel, just like previous products, and will still have no contract. And they are offering what they're calling a limited market release. So this is not going to be available tomorrow to most people. Insulet has a frequently asked questions section on their website that I got to say, it is one of the most robust I have ever seen in my 15 years of diabetes. So please go there. If you don't hear your question answered by Dr. Ly, I'm going to link it up at diabetes-connections.com. There will be a link in the show notes. And as I said, we're going to be covering this a lot more this year. And make sure you tune in. Every week I do a short newscast episode. We do that every Wednesday live at 4:30 on Facebook and YouTube. And then I turn that into an audio podcast, which comes out on Friday. Those are 5 or 6 minutes long. And I'm sure we're going to have Omnipod updates there. Okay, usual disclaimer. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Dr. Trang Ly, welcome back and congratulations.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm super excited to be here with you.
I feel like we should have a confetti cannon to start this episode off.
I know. It's been an incredible few days.
I'd like to talk a little bit later, perhaps, about more of your personal feelings. You've been involved in this for so long. And when we spoke in August, you were really generous about sharing some more of your experiences. But I know everyone who's listening wants to get into the nuts and bolts. So let's start by just jumping right in. Tell me what was approved by the US FDA. Let's talk about what Omnipod 5 is.
Yeah, so Omnipod 5 is our tubeless automated insulin delivery system that we've been working on for quite some time and that the whole entire community is excited about. I'll talk about it in terms of the components of the system. So we have the tubeless pod that many people will know and love today. And that essentially stays the same, but has added features. So it has the SmartAdjust technology, which is our algorithm inside the pod, and that delivers insulin every 5 minutes and can increase, decrease, or pause insulin delivery based upon the CGM value, so the sensor glucose value. So we are connected to a very important part of the system, which is the DEXCOM G6 sensor. Great sensor, accurate, and that is connected wirelessly to the pod. The person wears the pod and the CGM, and they can have on-body closed-loop control. Another key component is our controller device. So every person who is prescribed Omnipod 5 will have access to our Insulet-provided controller, which is basically the remote controller for the system. And on that is our Omnipod 5 app, where they're able to control their pod and do all their settings for the algorithm. And what is really quite unique about what got cleared and announced on Friday is that patients will also have the option to control their pods from compatible smartphones. And so that is really quite a unique advancement in technology and in diabetes for automated insulin delivery systems. You don't have to use the smartphone to control the pods, but that optionality is there for compatible smartphones. So that would, in certain cases, replace the need to carry the Insulet-provided controller.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about the smartphone aspect. As you said, this is a first in many ways. So I want to talk about that in more detail a little bit later on. And another component of the system then is the DEXCOM G6.
That's right. And I think what is unique about this is that you'll be able to control the G6 from the G6 app. So all of that start, stop sensor, all the calibration, all of that, and the DEXCOM follow, all that functionality that people are familiar with today stays the same in the Omnipod 5 system.
Okay, wait, now I need you to clear that up because you started off by saying you control it from the G6 app. Do you control it from the Omnipod 5 app?
No, you actually control it from the G6
app.
Oh,
so it stays the same.
That's right, yeah. Okay. So that is slightly different to other systems that are on the market. The G6 sensor is start and stopped through the G6 app, and then you have the functionality of the DEXCOM follow. With our system, with Omnipod 5, when you set it up, you enter in the transmitter ID for the DEXCOM, and what that allows the Omnipod 5 system to do is connect to that transmitter and display that information front and center of the Omnipod 5 system.
You know, it's funny. I am sure as we're talking, we're going to get into a lot of the weeds here because
I know we're going straight into the weeds already, aren't we?
But I know that we'll talk a lot more as this year goes on and as more and more people use the system. But I do want to kind of try to stick to some of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
I'll catch myself here. It's not you, it's me as we're going through this. Let's talk about how the system tries to keep people in range. Because one of the things that many in my audience I know are watching very closely are the customizable targets. So you can take Omnipod 5 and customize your glucose target from 110 to 150. Is that still the case? That's what was approved?
Yes, that's correct. That was what was approved. So you can set up, say during the day, you want to be at 120 and then overnight you want to be 110. You can set up a profile that would reflect that. You know, if you're someone who is new to AID and you generally tend to run a little bit higher and you don't want to be at 110 straight away and you want to, run at 130 for a while, you can set that profile. You can set that 24-hour profile up with glucose targets. And that is a unique feature of our system. And that's what was tested in our clinical trials. And we're really pleased to be able to offer this level of customization for our patients.
Tell me a little bit more about SmartAdjust. My listeners, and I almost hesitate to ask this, but my listeners are incredibly attuned to their devices. They have already taken so many of these devices and tried to customize them as much as possible. Many people are trying to adjust their glucose many times an hour. I wonder sometimes about the adjustment, and no pun intended with SmartAdjust, but the adjustment of people who you kind of need to leave these systems alone, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Have you already come up against that? Or is there any advice you'd tell people to kind of like ease into a system like this when they're used to making a ton of adjustments themselves?
Yeah, I do think there is some adjustment that needs to be made when adapting to an automated insulin delivery system. But I think a lot of your listeners will be fairly familiar with this type of technology. And really, it is the ability for the system to react to the CGM that's coming in and dynamically adjust insulin every 5 minutes. I mean, that is what is really the value here within our system. So SmartAdjust is our algorithm and the feature that is really going to set Omnipod 5 apart from the other systems out there. And it is what we tested in our clinical trials, which, as I mentioned to you on our last call, really had extraordinary results in terms of time in range, A1C reduction, and then that hypoglycemia profile, which was very low hypoglycemia. So I'm really proud of the system that we have built. It is something that we, improved upon over the years through our clinical trials. And it was really developed from learning from our patients and all of the participants who took part in our trials. So it really is a real love letter to the community who have advocated so hard for this level of innovation.
One of the very unique things about Omnipod 5 is that in reading about it, you always say it learns the user, right? It kind of changes as it goes and it adapts, which is brand new. This is not something that any of the other automated systems on the market, commercial systems, do. Can you explain what that means?
Yes. One of our design philosophies going into this is simplicity for the user. We know diabetes is an incredibly burdensome condition, and it was important for us that we did not, through delivering automated insulin, that we didn't make life even more challenging for people and requiring more attention. We really wanted to create more headspace for people to forget about their diabetes and do other things. Omnipod 5 is a real advance on that front. What we talk about in terms of learning and adapting is that our system initially takes the basal rates that are entered by the system as a starting point for the automated controller. And then the algorithm, as more information comes in, which includes the CGM values and then the total insulin that is delivered by the system, based upon that information, the algorithm will augment how much insulin the patient needs at baseline, and then with hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia as well. Perhaps the most stark example of this was when we had an adult patient who came in who had relatively high A1C starting point, so probably was not getting as much insulin as she needed, and so had a starting insulin program of around 27 units a day. And then over time, it was about 2 weeks where the insulin delivered by the system actually ramped up to close to 70 units a day. And that's just in basal insulin.
Wait. So from 27 to 70?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's a fairly extreme example, but what it shows is the capability of the system to take in new information and make adjustments along the way. And the whole point of that is really to reduce the work that people and parents have to make in terms of, tweaking those basal rates, because, we wanted a system that would reduce that type of burden for the user. We're doing as much as we can for our users in this first system, but there will still be the ability for users to augment the insulin to carb ratio and correction factor. That all works exactly the same. So if your insulin sensitivity changes over time, you may need to make those adjustments. but the ability for the algorithm to adjust that baseline insulin delivery, that dynamic control, does adapt based on new information coming in over time.
I said, wow. And I want to be very clear on why. I want to stand. Remember the confetti cannon I said at the beginning? I want to fire it again. I mean, I can only speak to my personal experience. I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm not an endocrinologist, but I talk to so many parents who feel like their kids aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, quote unquote. And then the doctor says, oh my gosh, you have to double the basal rates. And suddenly it's working again because things can change so much. And we don't know exactly. I can just think of my family as an example. When Benny was a tween to teenager, his basal rate doubled within 2 years and then doubled again. And he was getting these incredible amounts of insulin. And when I would tell my friends, a few of them would say, like, I could never do that. That sounds so dangerous. I can't believe how much he's getting. And I mean, I've shared, he was a woman getting 80 units of basal a day of just basal. And he's back down. It's not even close to that anymore, but he needed it. And I just feel like, gosh, I was going to ask you to give an example. And I'm so glad you gave that one, because to know that the system can learn that much and safely give that big a change is remarkable. I'm curious, did you have any changes in the other direction? Like people who are really worried about people who were really experiencing hypoglycemia?
Yeah. Stacey, going down is easy. Going up is hard. It's, and I'll tell you, it takes some courage to do these types of things. And people are scared. And I will share that I was scared in making, some of these decisions. But, I have learned so much from patients. I've taken care of teenage boys who
bless your soul,
who have, who need more than 100 units a day, who fluctuate between 70 and 120 units a day in a week. And that's what we need to be doing, is helping people like that, who really struggle and have different insulin sensitivities on a daily basis and different requirements, who are at risk of both hyperglycemia and hypo. And honestly, I carry that with me every day, all those learnings, and say, we have to create products that can, address this, because this is what we're trying to help here.
Right back to Dr. Ly in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by DEXCOM. If you're a veteran, the DEXCOM G6 continuous glucose monitoring system is now available at Veterans Affairs VA pharmacies in the United States. Qualified veterans with type 1 and type 2 diabetes may be covered. Picking your Dexcom supplies up at the pharmacy may save you a lot of time, too. Connect with your doctor for more information. Dexcom even has a discussion guide you can bring with you. Get that guide and find out more about eligibility. Here's the link. I'm going to put this in the show notes. It'll be easy to find. It's dexcom.com/veterans. But if you don't want to write that down, again, it'll be in our show notes at diabetes-connections.com. And now back to our conversation with Dr. Trang Ly. This next question may not make sense with the system, but you tell me. I wanted to know about the percentage of correction bolus that Omnipod 5 gives. And, my frame of reference is the Tandem Control IQ, which my son has used, which the system adjusts basal if you get close to 160. It gives you a partial bolus if you get close to 180. Is there anything like that going on here?
Yeah, okay, for sure. And what I'd say is that rather than having that modular approach that the other system has, ours really has that dynamic insulin delivery every 5 minutes. And it's pretty straightforward. Basically, whatever target you set, the system is always driving towards that target. Mm-hmm. So, you can be 110 all day and do that. And, when we did our clinical study, the adult and adolescent population, so this is the 14 and older age group, the target that they used most frequently was the 110 target. And in those patients, during the time that they were using that lowest target of 110, they were able to achieve 76% time in range. Really great to be able to do that. And so I would say it's basically that straightforward. Whatever target you set, the insulin, we're going to adjust insulin to try and get you there as quickly and as safely as possible.
If I'm hearing correctly, though, maybe with this system, we don't think about it as adjusting basal, giving a bolus. It's more, there's an algorithm in here and it's proprietary, but there's an algorithm in here and it's just giving insulin as needed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. It is a hybrid closed loop system. So people are still expected to bolus for meals.
Right.
And so that's really important for people to do. And, in order to really get good glucose control, it's important that people pre-meal bolus and work with their healthcare providers to really optimize that insulin to carb ratio and correction factor. But yes, our pancreas don't think in terms of basal and correction. Those are concepts that we made up. As I tell my team, insulin is insulin. It's basal, correction, whatever. It's really, how much insulin on board there is, what the trajectory is, and you just make the adjustment accordingly. So, I don't really separate it out.
New way of thinking. Really interesting. Again, I'm going to get us off topic here, but I am thinking of the people who've never pumped before and jumping into a system like this and how much different that must be.
Yeah, we always think about those patients because we think pump therapy is just a much better therapy in terms of the physiology of insulin delivery, and it's just a much safer modality there. So, actually in our clinical trial, we had about 15% of our users who were on multiple daily injections. So they came in and we put them straight on Omnipod 5. So they didn't have to first use a pump or first use a CGM. They just came straight in. We put them on Omnipod 5 and they did really, really well. And we presented that data at various conferences. So they really did ultimately just as well as the people who had previously been pumpers. It is very simple and easy to use. And the simplicity of our system is what makes it so great. And it really reduces that burden of, having to pull out pens and syringes when you're out and about and be able to discreetly deliver insulin from a phone device. I think really that is what sets our system apart from other systems is it's the simplicity and ease of use.
I'm going to give you a couple of specific questions for my listeners. If you can't answer that, we understand. And I actually have worked in a bunch of questions already. As you listen, I'm getting to as many as I can. But one came up that I thought was interesting, which was, is the system robust enough to defeat a 350 blood sugar on its own? I think everybody's been there. They forget to bolus. They're eating a big meal. They realize it too late. And then with these automated systems, you have to be very careful about how much you correct. And then there's a second part to this question, which is if I do want to give an additional shot for any reason, will the system keep track of something like that?
I guess it depends on why you're 350 in the first place. So if it's from food, an underestimation of carbs, or you forgot to bolus, then I will tell you that by the time you're 350, the algorithm has already known that and it has already delivered a bunch of insulin to bring you down. It will bring you down and it will generally do that in 2 to 3 hours and get you within range below 180 within that time. And we know that because the development of Omnipod 5, we specifically gave people these large meals and didn't bolus for them and watched the algorithm to see what it would do. And a part of the reason why that's so important is because we know this happens to people all the time. And we want to safely bring them down, but not cause rebound hypoglycemia, right. Because that is not good and people will not trust the system and will stop using it. So that is exactly the type of testing that we do. So I would say that it is very robust and it is very specifically targeted for that. In terms of the question of if you give a shot not through the pump, then no, the system would not know about that. But what it will detect is, a falling blood glucose level, and it will be able to suspend insulin delivery very quickly. And depending on the rate of change of glucose, it could suspend, even if it's in the 200s, it could suspend very quickly. And as far as I'm aware, actually, none of the commercial systems are able to import that information. So you would have to do that very cautiously because the system isn't aware of that external insulin.
It's an interesting question. We've done that. Sometimes there will be a bad infusion set or things will happen. I mean, obviously with the pod, it's a little different and you'll want to give a manual injection. I understand what you're saying. And I think it was a good question, but it's practically speaking, we're not going to be able to do every circumstance.
That's right.
Yeah.
Unless we had like this really special insulin detector.
That. Why don't we have that yet? We need a special insulin detector. Get on that, Dr. Ly. You can do it.
Well, technically it's very hard to do insulin assays. So yeah. But anyway, a story for another time.
People are thinking, in a layman's terms, what I think of a lot is, okay, if my son needs to give an injection, can he just put in, okay, pump, I gave myself this much? Because with the older non-smart pumps or before there were any hyperclosed loops, you really could do that. You could kind of fake a dose.
Yeah, you can't with our system.
Yeah. I don't think you can do that with any of the automated systems now. Another quick question before I move on to smartphone. Can you extend a bolus? That's not something that came up. Can you still do that? Or if you can't, do you even need to?
You can if you're in manual mode. So our manual mode is basically Omnipod Dash. That is when you set it up with the settings that you discuss with your healthcare provider, and they're preset basals and bolus settings. So if you're running that mode, or if you happen to, not have a CGM and you don't want to run an automated mode, then you will have that functionality to have extended bolus. And there are a number of reasons, but we actually looked at this in a clinical trial that we did, specifically looking at high-fat meals and using extended bolus with our algorithm versus just letting the algorithm work. And what the results showed was that with high-fat meals, the algorithm was better in terms of figuring out how much insulin you needed than a person trying to figure out, okay, how much do I give up front? How much do I extend? And because of that data, we decided not to include the extended bolus with our algorithm side. So in automated mode, extended bolus does not work.
Great. And you lead me then into the next point, which is, can you explain the manual mode? This is not something that the system decides you're in, right? This is the user saying, okay, I'd like to be in manual mode, or no, I'm going to be in auto mode. In other words, you can't get kicked out like on the Medtronic system.
Exactly. So the manual mode, as I mentioned, is all the preset settings that are programmed into the system. And then automated mode is when you have a CGM connected to it. And as long as you have a CGM transmitter ID entered, you are, and your target set up, off you go. And so the setup of the system is very similar to Omnipod Dash, except there is an additional step where you enter in the transmitter ID so that the pod knows which CGM to search for. And then once that value comes in fact, you don't actually have to wait for that value to come in. You can just start automated mode. And then the system will use the information that it has to augment insulin delivery.
Got it. Let's talk about the phone, because I think this is incredibly significant. It's a first for the FDA. It's just going to open the door, in my opinion, to so much other technology. Yes, right now, as you and I are talking, there's only 2 smartphone models it works with. That's going to change. But let's go down and talk about these features. This is full control allowed from a smartphone, right?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this feature. I mean, Stacey, it's the number one feature that our patients ask for over AID, over automated insulin delivery, which kind of really blows my mind.
I know. Well, I've shared in the past with you. I was going to say, I'm actually a little bit more excited about this. And I kind of hemmed and hawed because automated control is so incredible. But phone control is also, my son he cannot wait for this. It's just such a great thing. We don't, we don't use your system, but we can't wait. It's just such a great thing. So before I start getting all crazy, let's go through some of the features. Full control from the phone.
Yeah. And I want to say that, as a pediatric endocrinologist, I totally underappreciated the how our patients valued having phone control and being able to control their devices from their phone. And it wasn't really until I saw the data where everybody marked this as their number one request that I was like, we better start listening to patients. Because in my mind, if people aren't using their devices, they're not getting any benefit from automated insulin delivery. So it's really important that we address all the pain points for our patients. I am really proud of the team for getting this through and getting this cleared. It is just so meaningful for our patients. I think it's really important to clarify that if you don't have the phones that we currently, have available, it doesn't mean you can't use AID, that you can't use Omnipod 5. Our system will always come with an Insulet provided controller, and, you can use it as a separate device. But, very, very quickly, we're going to have many phones available where you can download an app. It's as simple as that. It works on your phone just like any other app. You open it up and you input your settings just like you would setting up a brand new controller. And then you start and stop your pods and manage everything just from your phone. And then you're getting rid of that controller device. You're carrying fewer devices. That's what it is. And, in future, we will have iOS, Apple devices in future. We haven't stated timing for that, but, all of that is in the works because, we care a lot about reducing the friction for people to use and access our devices. So I'm very excited about it.
All right. I know you can't give me a timeline, but you said very quickly. Is very quickly this year for Android and next year for Omnipod? Is very quickly Q2 for Android and end of this year for, can I get any timeline for iPhone?
No, I can't provide any timelines, but the team's working on it and, I get to see the prototypes and I get to test things out. So it's super fun for me, but I'm sorry, I can't provide any timeline updates.
One of the big questions that came up, Omnipod 5 is going to come out with a limited release. What does that actually mean? And how do you decide who gets it first and who gets it next? Is it geography? Is it when people signed up? How does it work?
I know everyone is super excited about Omnipod 5, especially us as a company. I think it's really best practice before we do anything big in life to start small and make sure that, all systems are working. And, we are doing a lot of innovation, actually, not just with the product, but also the way we serve patients in terms of our onboarding platform, our self-guided training, ordering, product support, all of that. So it's quite a large undertaking for our company. So what we're doing here is making sure that everything goes well and is smooth for our users before we embark on the full launch. So right now, just in the next few days, we'll be rolling out our limited market release. And then once we have all the information we need and all the data to make sure that we can handle all the demand that comes in, we'll be then announcing our full market release. And we expect that to be, in terms of timing, just shortly after the limited release is complete.
Okay, but I have to ask a follow-up on that. But to be clear, then it's a limited release for the people you've decided will get it.
Yes.
And then it goes to everybody? So it's not going to be a rolling limited release?
No.
Okay. So then my next question is the first question. How did you decide the limited release? Who are these people?
We haven't provided details about that. And part of it is really to make sure that we have, as I mentioned, really assessed our full systems and making sure that, we can address the demand that will be coming in. So I think what our patients really need to know is, how do they get on products? That's certainly the number one question that I'm getting is, how do I get on Omnipod 5 and how do I prescribe it? So, for that, I would say that today, getting on Omnipod Dash is the fastest way to get Omnipod 5 because for those users, that means that they most likely have access through the pharmacy channel. And then we expect that our Omnipod 5 coverage will be very similar to our Omnipod Dash coverage. So if you're already on Omnipod Dash, it's expected that, once Omnipod 5 is available and there is insurance coverage, which, we're ramping and growing every day, then that transition should be very, very smooth. And also, in terms of devices, if you're already on an Omnipod Dash and you're on a G6, you can go through our self-guided training. And so, already being familiar with our system and devices, that makes it a lot easier in terms of training and transition, but also it enables you to get onto our interest list for Omnipod 5. And what we'll be doing once it's fully available is really going through that list in order of people's names on it to make sure that they have coverage and getting them Omnipod 5 as quickly as possible. We're really committed to our current Dash users. I mean, all of our Omnipod users we're fully committed to.
Do people need a new prescription to move from Dash to Omnipod 5?
Yes, it's a different product. It's an entirely different product. So yes, they will need a new prescription.
Okay, because that was one of the interesting things with when Tandem rolled out Control-IQ. Sometimes as you listen, you got to get in touch with your endocrinologist once it starts rolling out.
That's right.
That's one piece of the puzzle we have to make sure to include. You mentioned Dexcom. Questions came up. Dexcom G7, knock on wood, could be approved in the United States this year. What will that changeover look like when it goes from G6 to G7 for Omnipod 5?
Yeah, so we're working on next in terms of integration, the physical integration with G7. We're working on that and future sensors. So we haven't announced any timing in terms of when Omnipod 5 would be available with G7, but it is something that we're working on. Even if G7 gets cleared this year, we certainly haven't announced anything in terms of Omnipod 5 compatibility with that at this point in time.
How about Medicare? Is the Medicare coverage expected to be seamless and supplies seamless for that population?
Yeah, so in that population, we have fairly good coverage for that, and again, growing and as well. And Omnipod Dash is available through the pharmacy channel. And as I mentioned, we have great coverage. And already today with Omnipod 5, we actually have more covered lives right now than we had even just a few months after Dash was launched. So the team has, our team has made extraordinary progress on that front to ensure that, when we're at full release, our patients can get access to that as quickly as possible.
And I should ask, the clinical trials were ages 6 to 70. While the lower limit is something that you have to talk to your endocrinologist about, people over the age of 70 can still use this device, right?
Correct. We're cleared for 6 and over. No problems for our 70-plus population.
Excellent. What about the rest of the world? The question was, has it been submitted for CE mark in Europe? My friends in Australia, your friends in Australia are like, what's going on?
I know. I already, I'm like really behind in my emails because everyone in Australia wants it. It's going to come. We have to get it cleared. And, our first hurdle was getting it across the line in the US. So, I'm just super, super excited to get it. And it means we have a great product and, our clinical trials prove it. And in time, it will get to all of those places.
I know I've kept you longer. I have 2 more quick questions for you. The second to last here is, will Omnipod and Dexcom work together on the customer service side? Now that you are linked as a system, will customers be able to work with both? If you're not familiar, as you listen with Tandem, sometimes you call Dexcom, sometimes you call Tandem. When you have issues, the Tandem can send you replacement sensors, things like that. It's not a seamless partnership. They won't help with everything. But I'm curious if Omnipod and Dexcom will start working together in that way.
Yeah, we've been working together for years, in fact, to get this right, because we care a lot about customer service and taking care of our patients. So the teams have been working together very, very closely to make sure that there is warm transfer between both companies for our patients. And that means, whatever we can address, we address, and whatever Dexcom addresses, they'll be addressing. Yes, so as you point out, it is different to some other models that are out there in that these are really 2 separate devices. And that means that Insulet is not handling any of the sensor orders, but we're just really focusing on Omnipod. And I think what that allows us to do is, allows each company to do what we're really good at and not like try and figure out how to be dispensers of sensors. That allows us to really scale and move quickly in this space. And again, it's a different type of a way to serve customers. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be wasting our customers' time over these things because they got better things to do.
I meant to ask when we talked about the phone control and the phone display, is a follow feature going to be part of Omnipod 5 so caregivers, spouses, can look?
Yeah, so we already have that today with Omnipod View app with the Omnipod Dash. That's really great and really great, especially for our pediatric population. So that capability already exists today, and we will be providing that later in the year.
And then before I let you go, you and I have talked several times, during this interview and when we last spoke, about how you have worked with patients for a very long time. You've seen the burden that diabetes puts on people and how systems like this can start to alleviate some of that. I can't imagine that you've had that much time to reflect. It just got approved last week. But, how are you feeling about this going forward? It's a culmination of so many people's work over the last several years. I guess what I'm saying is take a second, take a victory lap here.
Yeah, Stacey, it's been a pretty emotional week for me to be able to bring this to fruition. I think I really carry the spirit of many of my patients. Those types of interactions just never leave you. And just a lot of gratitude this week for what we'll be able to do for a lot of families.
I love it. I'd love to have you come back on, or maybe when the system has been out for a while, we can talk to some folks who've been using it and kind of dig a little bit more into how it's helping. But thank you so much for being so accessible, for answering so many of my questions, and congratulations. I know it's been a long time coming, and I'm so excited for my friends who use Omnipod to have this new choice. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stacey.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about this. I know you probably still have questions. Go to diabetes-connections.com for a couple of links, including that frequently asked questions section. It really is very robust and can answer a lot of what Dr. Ly was unable to get to. It's so exciting. Boy, I know, we're not podders. We have not used the Omnipod, but oh my gosh, I know the community has been waiting so long for this. I'm so thrilled for more people to get an automated insulin delivery system. It has made a huge difference with my son. And I can't wait to hear what you all think. I know some of you and some of the people in our Facebook group were in the clinical trials. I don't know how much you all can talk about that, but if you want to post about it, if you'd like to tell me more, you can shoot me an email, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. I'm just so excited. 2 quick things before I let you go. First, at the top of the show, I briefly mentioned Club 1921. This is our brand new project. It is still in beta, and it is where anyone with any type of diabetes can find events anywhere in the United States. If you have diabetes or you love someone who does, you are already a member of Club 1921. If you go to the website, club1921.com, you will find that it's very easy to sign up for free, and we will send you the events you're interested in. You never have to come back to the website. You just click a couple of boxes, tell us what you're interested in, and we will send you the events. If you'd like to list events, you can also sign up, and this is for everything from big conferences to educational events at hospitals to, a hangout, moms at a playground, going for coffee, whatever you want for the diabetes community, any type of diabetes, any type of event, anywhere in the United States. As I said, we're still in beta. I'd love for you to sign up and let me know what you think. And if you haven't already guessed why Club 1921, I'm sure most of you have guessed, that is the year that Banting and Best and the rest of their team are credited with the discovery of insulin. The second thing I want to address is, it's a little selfish, but I want to share the Omnipod story, this kind of breaking news. This kind of stuff is why I started the podcast. Many of you have heard the story before, but if you are new, I started the podcast in 2015 because there were, and there still are, a lot of really good diabetes podcasts out there, but most of them were people telling their personal stories. And that's great. And they were mostly adults. And, as a parent of a young child at the time with type 1, I could relate, but it wasn't exactly for me. But more to the point, there was nobody doing diabetes news. And that's my background. I was a local TV reporter and radio news host for my entire career, for 25 years plus. And I had just left a career in morning radio because I was so tired of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. As I'm sure you can imagine, I did that for 13 years. And I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I realized there was no one covering diabetes news. And it's not just saying, oh, Omnipod 5 is approved. It's asking the questions that you just heard. I mean, I guess it kind of sounds kind of braggy to talk about this, but to be frank, as the parent of a child with type 1 and as the spouse of somebody with type 2, I want to know this information. I want to hear it from these companies. I want to ask follow-up questions. I want to call them on it when we have questions that they aren't answering or we have issues that they're not addressing, whether that's a technology company or more to the point, the insulin companies and things like that. So if you're new, I hope you go back. We have a great search box on diabetes-connections.com. It's in the upper right-hand corner. And if you click on the episode page, there's more than 400 episodes. You can go through the archive. But I urge you to search for what you like, whether it's technology or issues, that sort of thing. And you can really see these products. We started talking about them 5 or 6 years ago and follow them through development, see how things have changed. To me, it's so interesting. And there are very few places to get our questions answered. A lot of these folks will go on the financial channels and talk about the company. And I'm thrilled. As you probably know, Omnipod stock went up. I don't own Omnipod stock or Insulet stock, but it went up last week. Hooray, that's fantastic. But I care less about that than I do about knowing what they mean by, the system learns you, right? So thanks for giving me the opportunity to just kind of share why I find this stuff so exciting. This is why I started the show. And I hope you enjoy listening. So if you have questions, if there's issues you want to hear more about, please let me know. You can always reach me through diabetes-connections.com or on social media. And boy, what do you think is next? Has this loosened up the logjam at the FDA? Are we going to see other issues that have been waiting? We've got Bolus by phone from Tandem. We've got stuff from Medtronic that's out there waiting. We got Tidepool Loop. Oh my gosh, I hope 2022 proves as exciting as it has started out. Please join me every Wednesday for In the News. I do that live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and at 4:45 on Instagram. And then we turn that into a regular podcast episode that comes out on Fridays. That's just 5 or 6 minutes of the top news headlines in our community every week. And then on Tuesdays, I do these longer format interviews. They usually go up at 4 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. This one was a little different if you're listening as it is first released, because I did the interview with Dr. Ly today. I did it at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and then we turned it around and got it out as quickly as possible. Thank you, as always, speaking of those kind of audio heroics, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.